Welcome back to Module 4, where we're going over the nuts and bolts of creating an essential oil formula. As per the last video, I'll just run through the steps really quickly in case you didn't jump right from one video to the next and had a gap of time in between. So just introduction to the process of building an essential oil formula. First, you need to choose the oils. Then you need to determine each oil's position in the formula, chief, deputy, assistant, or envoy. And then the percentage of each of those positions within the formula. And then you need to decide the percentage of the overall formula as a whole, the dilution percentage, if you are going to be diluting. And if you are going to be diluting, you need to choose a carrier oil. And then you need to determine methods of use and length of use, and just think ahead to discussing with your patient what they might expect. Okay, so beginning with that, choosing individual oils. So things that you're going to want to consider about each oil that you're thinking of using, and also about how the oils will work together. And so that's why when I talked about creating a larger list at first of probably more oils than you're going to use, because as you begin to go through these steps and considering how these oils are going to all work together, some of them are naturally going to fall to the wayside and others will begin to look really good. So you want to consider, obviously, the functions of the oil. Does it match your treatment principles and what you're trying to achieve? Temperatures, notes, because remember again, we're looking for a balanced formula. I'm going to put this in parentheses, but dilutions should be considered. If you pick, sometimes if you have like a really wide outlier in percentage wise, it can throw off creating the formula a little bit. You just might either have to think more about it or choose not to use it. Like if you want 4 10% dilution oils and then you have one that's 1%. That's just something to think about. It doesn't necessarily mean you won't use an oil, but it just might change how the other oils get used a little bit. Channels, channel affiliation, contraindications, of course. And lastly, but not least, how they're going to smell together. And you can test, you can bring them out and kind of see how they're going to smell together. Some oils just don't blend well. Some blend really well. And there's different schools of thought on that. There's some people who think you should choose oils that are a little aggravating to your patient or that they might not like to invoke change. And unless you have a really compliant patient that is like going to do whatever you suggest, patient compliance might not be that great if you pick a bunch of oils that they don't like. And sometimes other family members come into play with that too. You might make a blend for somebody, it works just fine for them, they think it smells nice, and they get into bed and their spouse is like, no way, what do you have on? I can't sleep with you like this. So you may have to, all kinds of reasons that you might have to tweak something. So these are all things you're going to want to consider when you're making your first list of oils that you might include in a formula. Okay, and now, as we said, you need to decide the position of each oil within the formula. And when deciding what oil is going to hold which position, there's a lot of room for individualization. There's a lot of room to get creative. You can have 2 chiefs that are equal percentage. You could have no deputy. You can have 2 assistants. You could have You know, maybe you have 2 chief oils, 1 assistant, and 1 envoy, or classic, maybe you like to really keep it classic, chief, deputy, assistant, envoy every time. There's a lot of room and you can get creative, and it's different working with the really small 3 to 5 oils rather than a larger herbal formula. And yep, we talked about that already. And then the next step was, after you've chosen which oil is going to fulfill which position within your formula, you have to decide what percentage each of those positions is going to be within the formula. And if that's not really making sense to you, let me show you a simple way to break this down, which I think will also clarify what it is I'm talking about. So a really easy way to do this, and I use this a lot. I use this this breakdown a lot. It's just nice and easy, and applies to a lot of formulas. So maybe your chief oil is going to make up 40% of the formula. Deputy, 30%, assistant, 20%, envoy, 10%. So that's a really simple way to break it down. Brings you to 100%. Chief at 40, deputy 30, assistant 20, envoy 10. Also gives everybody a nice, sticks to the hierarchy well. And then adjust that as you see fit. And some things you'll see as we begin to create some formulas, some things that might cause you to adjust this are the percentage of the individual oils themselves. So if you want, say, Melissa to be your envoy, and a common percentage used for Melissa is 1%, it's not going to be 10% of your formula. So you're going to adjust that down. And, you know, like lavender has a super high percentage you might want to do. And then if you really want to go after that main therapeutic principle, you can take this up to 50% of your formula, even 60, and then these would drop down. Maybe this would be 20, this would be 10, and this would be 5. So there's a lot of ways to play with this and to adjust this, but this is a nice basic structure to begin with and then work from there. And also something to think about too, with the really expensive oils, they might not end up being your chief oils. You know, an oil that is $3 a drop, you might not be using 60 drop, you know, or 40 drops of that in a formula. So that, you know, depending on what you and your patients want to spend, that also can come into consideration. And now you need to consider the dilution percentage for your blend. And this is a very simple math. Dilution percentage of the blend as a whole, and this is if you are diluting. If you're not diluting, you just figure out what percentage each oil is and go from there. If you are diluting, you need to figure out what your dilution rate is going to be. And a very simple way to do that is to take the average percent of your 3 to 5 oils that you're going to be using. So just add those up, divide it by how many you have, and you'll come up with somewhere probably between 5 and 7 or 8% on average. So that's the simplest way to do it. And then also an easy way to do it, 6% is almost always safe. It's easy math-wise, as you'll see when we do the example. And so that's a way to go too. And you can kind of eyeball your formula, and eyeballing your formula and the individual dilution rates of each individual oil is you're going to be like, yeah, that's about 6%. And if you have, like I said, one of those real outliers, it's either really high or really low, and then you add up and you do your percentage math, that could throw things off a little bit and change how you're going to think about it. But 6% is generally a safe dilution. And then other people who are really in favor of the less is more approach, their basic dilution rate is generally 4%. So 6 or 4%, depending on what you're comfortable with, are a good basic safe dilution rate. And this is just a good thing to know to understand the math that we're about to do. I didn't learn this until later, and I never quite understood a piece of the math that we're about to do because of this. So I'll go ahead and tell you right off the bat. Okay, 1 ounce is approximately 600 drops. So half an ounce is approximately 300 drops. And so based on that, at 6%, we get 60 drops of essential oil per ounce, or 30 drops per half ounce. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and write that on a separate one, but this is, so 1 ounce is approximately 600 drops. And that's our starting place for the basic essential oil math. I think this is getting shifted as we talk here, as I write on it. Try to get it back. Okay. And so at 6%, and this is a really handy thing, you could even like write this in the front of your Materia Medica, have it on an index card or something like that. So at 6%, 1 ounce gets 60 drops, half ounce, 30 drops, 10 mil, 20 drops, 5 mil, 10 drops. And I actually use little 5mm glass rollers with a metal roller ball a lot. It's a great size because the essential oils last so long that dispensing an ounce or a half an ounce, especially in dilution, is going to take someone a long time to go through. So I find this a super convenient way to go. I don't even carry 1 ounce bottles. We start with half ounce, and then we have 10 mil and 5 mil, and then we go down to 2 mil, a dram, which is about 4 milliliters, and 2 milliliter bottles, teeny cute little ones. I'll bring all these bottles when we meet in person. But yeah, just so this is a nice little chart of easy breakdown when you're working at 6%. And that's also really easy to multiply upward. If you find a really great blend and dilution that you want to use for like a massage oil, if you're a massage therapist, or for cupping or gua sha or something. So you can obviously go up higher than an ounce too, and just do the math in the opposite direction. With essential oils, we tend to work in tiny amounts, but if you're using a lot of an oil, it's easy to go up. We talked about wide outliers. And then with our chief 40%, deputy 30%, assistant 20%, Envoy 10%. If we're doing this at 6% for a half ounce, then this is what the math works out to. The chief would be 12 drops of your chief oil, and the math there is 30, because remember we're doing 30 drops because we're doing 6%, so we're doing 30 drops total for 6% of a half ounce. So 30 drops times 0.4 for 40%, the math comes out to 12 drops. And then for the deputy, we've got 9 drops, that's 30 times 0.3. For the assistant, we've got 6 drops of your assistant's essential oil, that's 30 times 0.2. And then we've got 3 drops of the Envoy, which makes up 10% of our formula, so that's 30 times 0.1. So I hope you make it so you can see the whole board there. So this is the math of creating an essential oil formula. And obviously, if you're doing a 4% formula, then what's going to change is your total drops that you're getting there. So, and then these add up to 30, of course. So we have a total of 30 drops of essential oil, and to be put into a half ounce of carrier oil. And again, like I said, if you're not diluting this formula, if you're not putting it in a carrier oil, you can forget about all of this and just focus on this. You just decide however many drops you want. You can decide randomly however many drops you want, and then make sure that 40% of those drops are the chief oil, 30% are the deputy, 20% are the assistant, and 10% are the Envoy. So if this isn't seeming super clear to you right now, don't worry. We're going to keep going over this, and when we apply it to actual case studies and actually making formulas, it's going to get more and more clear as we go through the course. And then also, it seems like kind of a lot of work, but it's really worth it. And what it does is it results in a very carefully thought out and created formula. And that's worth it. You know, your patients are worth that, and you're worth that if you're making it for yourself. So it just provides, results in a very thoughtful, safe formula. It's worth it. It's worth the time, and it's worth the thought that goes into it. Yeah, so that's the basics of creating an essential oil formula. And like I said, we'll keep revisiting it. We're going to do it. We're actually going to apply it right away in Module 5. We're going to apply it to creating some formulas for exterior wind invasions. So we've got the basic math. Hopefully you have it written down. And then we can begin to use it.